As Abraham mentioned before, there is a Q&A function, so please make sure to drop your questions into the Q&A. That way we're able to keep track and provide answers. You are more than welcome to drop your questions in the chat, but may take us a little longer to get to them if the chat is moving very quickly. We will create an FAQ document or section, and it will be posted to the center's website. I've dropped that link in the chat. And I will pass it back to Abraham now to get us started.
Thank you so much, Antonia. And this is a collaborative effort, teamwork. And with that said, I definitely want to introduce y'all to all of our team members here at the center. But first off, the center is a statewide intermediary organization that helps organize resources and human capital to address health inequities, facilitates private-public partnerships, and Sierra Health Foundation is a private foundation focused on the Sierra Nevada region. The center is a separate statewide intermediary organization, but they're definitely connected. Our president of the center is Kaying Heng. Our associate vice president of programs is Matt Cervantes. Myself, as senior program officer of Transform Youth Justice, as you just met, our colleague Antonia Gonzalez, program associate with Transform Youth Justice, and also with Elevate Youth California. So if some of y'all might know Antonia, and Devontae Springer, program associate, Transform Youth Justice program. We're also supported by our communications and evaluations team members, Samantha Garcia as interim associate director, Lisa Veer, senior communications officer, and Dr. Maurice Samuels, the managing director of evaluation and learning, Dr. Anthony Maikuri, evaluation officer, also with the evaluation team. Those that will be awarded will also interact with our other team members, which include Scott Sant as Controller of Finance and Administration, Lucas Coe, Associate Controller, Joan Cassis, Managing Director of Contracts, Risk and Compliance, and Carissa Rogers, also with the team on Contracts, Risk and Compliance, Contract Administrator, too. With that said, that is our team. Here at the center, we bring people together, a range of capacities and team members, ideas and infrastructure to create positive change in California. We leverage that and are dedicated to health and racial equity. As I had shared, the center is the managing entity of Transform Youth Justice program in partnership with the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. And another example is that the center is also a managing entity for Elevate Youth California. With that said, I'll pass it to our colleagues at Vera.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Celine Villanco Miles. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior program associate with Vera's Ending Girls Incarceration Initiative. So the Vera Institute of Justice, or Vera Initiative to End Girls Incarceration, aims to zero out the number of young people who are incarcerated on the girls' side of the country's youth legal system. And we do that by working directly with local jurisdictions through research, advocacy, and by providing technical localities directly. The initiative was launched in 2017, and we've successfully worked in jurisdictions across the country, including New York City, Hawaii, Maine, North Dakota, and California's Santa Clara County. And Vera is also the primary organization that's providing technical assistance to the 4 counties that are participating in the Ending Girls Incarceration in California Action Network. And those 4 counties are Imperial, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Sacramento counties. You might have seen a couple of other faces from our team who are here, Allison Colucci, who is our operations manager for EGI, and Lindsay Rosenthal, who is our initiative director. You'll mainly be hearing from me in today's webinar, but there are lots of other staff that you see here from our team at Vera, Sarah Derrigan and Asia Bowman, who are both program associates who have been involved in this process and supporting participating counties in the Action Network. And you'll probably see them moving forward as we continue to collaborate in this work. So really nice to be here today.
Thank you so much, Celine. With that said, here's the agenda throughout this webinar. We're going to start off with program background. We're going to connect about the funding opportunity itself. We're going to share about how you can apply through the online form and also how to be competitive in your application. Throughout these sections, we also include sections for Q&A. So with that, we'll start in terms of the purpose for this funding initiative, and I'll pass this back to Celine.
Yes. So the purpose of this Ending Girls Incarceration initiative is to fund a community-based diversion program in each of the 4 counties who are participating in the Ending Girls Incarceration Action Network, or you'll hear us call it the Action Network on today's call. Again, just those counties are Imperial, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and San Diego counties, just so that we all have those counties front of mind. We'll talk a little bit more about the work those counties are currently doing to end girls' incarceration, but really when we think about the goal of this funding opportunity, it's to ensure that the diversion program that is funded in each county is situated within the broader reform efforts that each county is working on to ensure that girls and gender expansive youth are out of facilities and kept in community. And it's also to address the urgent race, gender, and health disparities that we know are happening in the youth legal system and to promote the well-being of girls and gender expansive youth in their own communities. And we just want to specify that the diversion program grant that's being offered through this funding opportunity is independent from the grants that counties are receiving to participate in the Ending Girls Incarceration Action Network. Next slide. So why end girls' incarceration in California? Why is this something that we want to prioritize through this work and through this funding opportunity? Well, the reason is because California is actually a really critical state in the fight to end girls' incarceration nationally and to get to zero. California as a state is responsible for about 13% of girls' long-term commitments across the country, and it's actually the top incarcerating state given its sheer size. But it's also ripe for change, and we believe that getting to zero is possible. And that's because when we examine why girls in California are being arrested and detained, we find that girls are overwhelmingly incarcerated for reasons that are not related to public safety concerns, are not in the best interest of young people, and quite frankly, are not in line with best practice. You can see here 70% of girls arrests, 70% of girls petitions, and over 50% of girls detentions in 2020 were for misdemeanors, meaning lower level charges, or for status offense charges, which are those offenses that we only consider to be criminal because of a young person's status as a minor, like running away from home or not attending school. And if California stopped detaining for misdemeanors and status offenses, it would reduce girls' incarceration by almost half. So we really see this funding opportunity as an exciting chance to help California get to zero by better aligning responses to girls and gender expansive youth with what we know is best practice, and by providing community-based resources for young people who truly need it in their communities. Next slide, please. We also want to prioritize this work because we know that ending the incarceration of girls and gender expansive youth is an urgent matter of race and gender equity. The chart you see here is actually from a report that Vera co-authored with the Young Women's Freedom Center. It's called Freedom and Justice, Ending the Incarceration of Girls and Gender Expansive Youth in California, and it was published earlier this year. The report lays out the scope of girls' incarceration using quantitative and qualitative data, and by centering the voices, experiences, and recommendations of girls and gender expansive youth. And in that report, we found that 76% of girls detained in California are Black and Latina girls, and that Black often see the largest disparities. They make up only 8% of California's youth population, but account for 26% of all girls in detention admissions. So it's really important that we name and we focus on these disparities, and we take steps to disrupt the gendered and racial pathways that are driving girls to incarceration. And these are the expectations of participating counties. So the good news is that the 4 counties, again, who we've named, who are participating in this action network are already working and have been working to get to zero. Imperial, LA, Sacramento, and San Diego have committed to a 3-year initiative to implement equitable policies, identify gender responsive programming that's needed to reduce girls' numbers, and to set in motion multi-year plans to get to zero. In year one of this action network, each county provided data to assess their systems. They identified system gaps in community-based services that were needed to serve girls and gender-expansive youth. And they also committed to court and policy reforms that would reduce the number of incarcerated girls and gender-expansive young people in their counties. And now, as counties move to year two, they're continuing that work, and they're continuing that work by committing to support the implementation of the community-based diversion programs that are going to be funded through this RFA, continuing to implement those court-based policy and formal practice changes that they began implementing in year one of the Action Network, and by participating in collaborative planning with other local leaders in communities to develop medium, long-term, and short-term priorities for continuing this work to get to zero. So we wanted to outline really the expectations here of participating counties to show you how those expectations inform and are part of the broader work that is happening simultaneously at the county level as the community-based diversion programs that are funded through this RFA are implemented. And they really align the work that's being done in year one and the work that now counties are committing to in year two aligns with what we expect to see from programs that are funded through this RFA. They fit together really nicely. So we've been providing technical assistance to all 4 of the counties, and what we've seen from the time that we've been providing technical assistance is various themes related to why girls are being detained in each jurisdiction. And they've largely mirrored what we've seen in national trends. And it includes, girls being detained and gender expansive young people being detained because they are a flight risk or having a history of running away. Detaining girls and gender expansive youth due to a lack of resources in their communities. Detaining girls for their personal safety or because they're experiencing housing instability and there's nowhere else to go. Or sometimes just detaining girls simply because they've been deemed difficult to serve or they're seen as less likely to succeed in community-based programming for various reasons. What we at Vera know from doing this work is that detaining girls for those reasons is completely out of step with what is evidence-based and with best practice. And in many cases, detaining girls and gender expansive young people for these reasons actually exposes them to more harm and exacerbates the very issue that brought them to court in the first place. So as we launched this funding opportunity in year two to support the work that counties have accomplished in year one, we really wanted to emphasize the 2 following goals that you see here and just let you know that proposals to this RFA will be evaluated based on alignment to these 2 EGI goals. So the first is the goal for the programs that are funded through this RFA. They'll be evaluated on their ability to implement gender responsive diversion programming that keeps young people in communities. We know that girls and gender expansive young people who are system involved or who are at risk for system involvement are often young people who are most impacted by trauma, have more acute mental health and or substance use needs, and may require higher numbers of service hours dedicated to serve. And because they require so much effort to engage and they may have more complex needs, girls and gender expansive young people often are excluded from existing continuums of care, and that results in them becoming stuck in cycles of incarceration. And it is exactly these young people that this funding opportunity is hoping to serve. So there are a few design elements that we'll be looking for in line with this first goal, and that will be a program's ability to divert young people away from formal court involvement, a program's ability to support young people who are court involved to minimize any deeper involvement with the youth legal system and avoid incarceration in a detention center placement facility, and a program's ability to promote successful community reintegration for young people who are being released from facilities into the community. And that can include engaging young people while they're inside facilities, but with the purpose to help them plan for their release. The second initiative goal that we are really looking to fund proposals that are aligned with is that we're going to be looking for proposals that are evaluated on their ability to promote community well-being and the healing and safety of girls and gender expansive youth through the implementation of healing-based, gender-responsive, and culturally appropriate diversion programs, and through transformative relationships, engagement, and accompaniment. we know that girls and gender expansive young people come to carceral legal systems for different reasons than cisgender boys. And what that means is that effective diversion responses need to be different as well, and they need to provide programming in a way that accounts for the social inequities and the power dynamics that are driving incarceration of girls specifically and gender expansive young people. And we also know that there's no single definition of what gender responsive means when it comes to programming, but rather evidence supports gender response strategies that can be incorporated and applied through a variety of program models or service types to effectively engage girls and gender expansive youth. So it's really not about what a program does or the content it delivers, but also how the program engages girls and gender expansive young people, and whether that is done in a manner that's responsive to the fullness of their identities and their experiences. So again, similarly, in line with this goal and in line with what we just outlined, there are a few program and design elements that we'll be looking for that align with what best strategies are for gender responsive programming. And those are providing healing-based, culturally responsive, and gender-affirming engagement and programming, prioritizing the self-determination of young people, emphasizing flexibility and fun to support young people's engagement and programming, and reframing accountability so that it means creating program accountability structures that focus on program accountability and the program's accountability to engage and to show up, as well as young people's accountability. Supporting staff to tolerate distress and promote patience, particularly as it relates to discomfort on how long it might take to see results, and not labeling girls as compliant or failing them out of programs, or extending community supervision and being comfortable with that. Using the tools of the system in ways that support girls and gender expansive youth. And this means the program being adept in how it's supporting young people to navigate their own system involvement, leveraging knowledge of the system to provide the kinds of supports that girls need to navigate key legal decision points, providing economic supports, and lastly, mirroring all of these strategies with staff. We know that staff can only create safe and healing environments for young people when they themselves are experiencing those environments as well. So it's really important to us that we see potential programs that are creating structures for program staff so that they feel the power of a humanizing interpersonal and community environment, as well as participants who are in the program. So those are kind of program elements and year two initiatives for proposals that we will be looking for as you create your applications.
Thank you so much, Celine. Next, we'll connect about the RFA values and guiding principles. The partnership between OYCR, Vera, and the center is intentional about moving beyond closing facilities and moving towards in-community, by-community solutions that provide young people with safety, healing, and opportunity in their communities, and that address how race and gender discrimination lead to arrest and legal contact in the first place. Collaboratively, we are setting these values and guiding principles, and please keep them in mind as you're applying. We want to make sure that we're transparent, that the review process will definitely look at strong alignment with the values and guiding principles that are here. Solutions must be rooted in best practice, lived experience, and on-the-ground expertise. Program staff should reflect the identities of girls and gender expansive youth who are incarcerated. Principles of equity, recognizing the need to strive for race, gender, and health equity in program activities and outcomes. Programs and services must be culturally responsive, trauma-informed, healing-based, and linguistically appropriate. Programs and organizational priorities must be informed by and with youth involved in carceral systems. An intersectional approach to health equity, a commitment to youth and family engagement that is unwavering and transformative. Prevention and education that is tailored and utilizes stigma-reducing approaches. Principles of shifting power and agency to those who are closest to the problems and the solutions. That is what's going to guide this funding opportunity in terms of values and guiding principles. In the RFA, you'll find on page 25 and onwards a glossary of terms that are commonly used throughout the RFA. These include some of the terms here: adverse childhood experiences, capacity building, community-based organization. We also share definitions for gender responsive programming or gender responsiveness, healing-based practices, intersectionality, net widening, somatic practices, status offenses, restorative justice, transformative justice. Please reference the glossary, as these are concepts that are also maybe new to some of these counties. With that said, we also include definitions on thriving, on transformative relationships, on trauma-informed practices, on youth diversion. We wanted to share some of those with y'all here and elaborate on them, highlighting them because of their importance in this RFA and this funding opportunity, really in advancing the efforts to end gross incarceration. Healing-based practices, healing that involves the basic logic of transformation or transmutation from sickness to wellness, enacted through culturally salient actions. Common healing practices may include the use of medicines, such inclusive of traditional methods, methods of getting things out of to heal the body, inclusive of somatic practices, manipulations of the body through touch and gestures or with specific materials, inclusive of acupuncture, diagnostic or other practices that establish the nature of the affliction in terms of its causes, consequences, or some other classificatory scheme. The use of rituals and ceremonies incorporating words, music, and other cultural devices all may involve the afflicted individual or the healer alone, interaction between patient and healer, and or the participation of a whole group or community. We encourage applicant organizations to really share what are the healing practices that will be enacted throughout the 2 years of the program. Also, as it's been affirmed throughout the webinar so far, at the core of it, we acknowledge that each county has identified programmatic priorities. However, we know that it's also about the quality of the relationships between people, between and among people. By transformative relationships, we're also including that transformative accompaniment and mentorship. So we share here some potential ways to define or to describe what may be transformative relationships. Transformative relationships facilitate mentorship and accompaniment, and our dynamic healing center spaces, land remediation, and interactions that improve the quality of relationships and life experiences among people, thereby cultivating beloved communities in which people interact together in ways that catalyze individual, collective awareness, comprehension, and healing from past, present, future traumas, harms, and wounds. Transformative relationships draw on culturally relevant practices and on the understanding of the potential intergenerational impacts of harms, and serve as rooted catalysts for transforming cycles of harm and violence to create and generate new past, present, and future possibilities for individual and community wholeness and well-being. With transformative relationships, we also acknowledge indigenous concepts such as 7 generations back, healing 7 generations back and 7 generations into the future. More importantly, how would you or your organization define transformative relationships in practice? We encourage organizations to just continue to define this, and it's in that collective power through which we define these concepts. So we wanted to highlight two of some here, but I'll pass it now to Celine, who will also elaborate on other terms.
Thank you, Abraham. So another term that we wanted to emphasize in today's presentation is net widening. Best practice states that placing conditions and rules and requirements on girls and gender expansive youth is only appropriate when those young people would otherwise be arrested and prosecuted in the carceral legal system. But what we also know is that conditions and requirements are often placed on young people who participate in diversion programming, even in cases when those people don't pose significant risk to public safety and who would otherwise be released by police with a warning or have their case dismissed out of court if not for the existence of that diversion programming. So we really just want to emphasize, again, as in the glossary, this is in the RFA, but in today's webinar, that for the purposes of today's RFA, subjecting low and medium risk girls to conditions of supervision as a stipulation to participate in diversion programming, or requiring that diversion programming happen when girls would otherwise simply be released, will be considered net widening. And then the second term that we want to really define and make sure that everyone is clear about is youth diversion. Generally, when we say youth diversion in this RFA, we're referring to tailored interventions, which provide community-based services as an alternative to formal system involvement. We know that youth diversion can mean different things in different spaces, and in some circumstances, it can rely to only very specific off-ramps for youth that are offered at very specific points in the carceral legal system. But in the RFA, we're using the term youth diversion more broadly than that, and we're using it to describe the widest range of interventions and supports that can be made available for youth across the entire spectrum of the system. So this can include off-ramps that are made available in interactions with police and law enforcement, which are much more upstream, as well as off-ramps and interventions that can be made in interactions that youth may have at youth justice system points and system contacts that come further downstream as well.
Thank you so much, Celine. With that, we are at a point where we will begin talking about the funding program overview. With that, definitely want to take a moment here. We're doing good on time. Want to just bring in some somatic practices. So, if, this is a lengthy webinar and is really intentional in that way. So if you want to move a little bit, stretch, we'll give some time so that we can answer a couple questions if possible. So at this moment, I pass it to our team members, Antonia and or Devante.
Thanks. Yeah, I can highlight a question here that we had in the chat. How are you including the needs of girls with disabilities in your priorities for this project?
Thank you for that question. I defer to Vera team.
Sure. So as I stated before, we're really looking for programs to serve young people who, from what we know, again, are young people who get stuck in those cycles of incarceration. And what we know from the way that girls and gender expansive young people come to carceral legal systems is that oftentimes that's tied to their trauma, that's tied to their unique experiences as girls and gender expansive young people. And if they have disabilities, it can be tied to their disabilities as well. So I would say those are incorporated in the sense that we're looking for programs to really help young people who are already system involved because of their trauma or their experiences, including disabilities, or are at risk for that system involvement because of their trauma or their experiences, which includes disabilities. So hopefully that helps clarify that.
Thank you so much, Celine. The only thing I would add is definitely that stronger applications will be looking for programs, the way that they structure responses to the various needs, including what systems call complex needs. So that's where collaborations come in. And we know that one organization can't do it all. But that's what we'll be looking at in terms of strength of application. That's what we could share at this moment. Hopefully that answers some of that question. With that said, I'll pass it back to you, Antonia.
Thank you. We have another question. Who decides what level of risk a youth poses? Thank you.
Sure. So I would say risk level is generally a process that varies by county. And generally, those determinations are made via law enforcement and probation agencies who determine level of risk. But we're also happy to discuss, further in office hours if you have more nuanced questions about risk level and how that pertains to the RFA.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll drop the next office hour link with the registration link as well. So thank you for highlighting that. Next question here that we have is, due to restrictions on youth access in LA County, we are experiencing barriers in gaining access to youth while in camps. Are pre-release services mandatory?
Thank you for that question. Pre-release services are not mandatory. However, we are looking for programs that can provide counties with diversion options. And I do acknowledge that there are some challenges in establishing a partnership in terms of MOU and formal diversion with courts and or probation. So our role is to support in bridging those conversations. But I'll pass it to Vera and or OICR if they want to elaborate on this question. And the question was, are pre-release services mandatory?
I would agree, Abraham, by saying that they're not mandatory. We did define diversion very broadly, so we are looking for diversion that can happen at multiple system points. And so I think that can be something that's included, and we would encourage applicants to think about incorporating, but it's not mandatory.
Thank you so much. Hopefully that answers that question. I'll pass it back to you, Antonia.
Thank you. Last question here that we have in the Q&A, is there a preference for new/pilot programs, or can the funding be used to maintain or further a current initiative?
Most definitely. Applications can, some organizations will submit applications or may submit applications to expand or supplement current diversion programming. Other organizations may submit an application proposing to create a new diversion program, which is the strength of the application will depend on the track record. And we'll definitely look at that along with responses to, for example, the narrative questions, alignment to the goals of the initiative, the outcomes of the initiative, responsiveness to the programmatic priorities identified by each county, and of course, alignment with the values and guiding principles. That's what I could share in terms of what would be a strong application. And if that's the question so far, we'll definitely try to pace ourselves throughout this webinar and include those Q&A sections. With that, go ahead, Antonia.
Thank you. Wanted to just highlight one last question that was asked previously in the Q&A. We did drop a couple links. Can the data that was used to inform and put together this RFP be shared with applicants to see and refer to in our applications? And in our Q&A and under the answered section, we did the information that was used today. That report is forthcoming and will be, Celine, if you could confirm if it will be posted to the Vera Institute. I do welcome folks to review the most recent publication, Freedom and Justice, Ending the Incarceration of Girls and Gender Expansive Youth in California. And that link is in the Q&A, and I can drop that in the chat.
Thank you so much, Antonia. And yeah, Vera team, once the data is published, will it be on your website, or where could they reference that if and when data will be published?
Okay, some of this data I think has been shared out by county leaders in each county. So I would encourage if there's questions about the data and how to, get what's been made available locally to come by office hours. And then we will be releasing more detailed reports about each of the counties, but those are not yet publicly available. So, but we're happy to talk through in office hours any more detailed questions about the county diagnostic processes from the first year of the Action Network.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. With that, we'll continue this webinar with the funding opportunity program overview. So the funding opportunity, through this funding opportunity, the Office of Youth and Community Restoration is investing $4 million over 2 years to fund youth diversion programming in Imperial, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and San Diego. Up to $1 million per county will support one to three organizations in each county in implementing gender-responsive programs to divert girls and gender-expansive youth from carceral systems. This funding opportunity is open to emerging grassroots CBOs, established CBOs, and tribal organizations, including those designated as 638 organizations, in which include Indian health services providers. In terms of how the four counties were selected, these counties were selected to participate in the EGI California Action Network in 2023. Based on a competitive application process through which the selected counties committed to ending gross incarceration and provided data demonstrating the possibility for impact in their own county and their readiness to implement change. Award period is December 1, 2024 to November 30, 2026, if awarded. At this moment, definitely also want to share a transparency statement. We recognize that this funding opportunity for CBOs may constitute a major source of funding for an organization's annual operating budget. It is important to share upfront that this funding opportunity is, as of right now, a one-time funding opportunity. The center encourages organizations to plan and budget accordingly. What we will not fund, you can find this in the RFA, but definitely we cannot fund and will not fund through this funding opportunity debt retirement, operational deficits, politically partisan activities, explicitly religious activities, activities that exclusively benefit the members of sectarian or religious organizations, purchase of vehicles. However, funds can be used for gas and mileage or other related transportation costs, purchase, construction, or permanent improvement other than minor remodeling of any building, other facility, or land will not be funded. However, funds can be used for expenses that are housing-related costs, including rental assistance for program participants, not for the organization's operations, such as office space. We discourage strongly any applications that propose the use of technologies shown to be harmful or that have been shown to increase the likelihood of system involvement. With that said, examples of what can be funded are here. Indirect costs up to 20%. Administrative and executive team functions that support multiple program areas. Those include indirect costs. Purchases, transportation, and staff expenses that benefit multiple program areas. Indirect rates are not allowable on capital expenditures, aid payments, other direct voucher payments, or any stipend, subsidy, or expense aid on behalf of a client, such as security deposits, rental payment assistance. That's just on the indirect cost side. On the other column, you'll see that up to 25% of the budget can be towards discretionary resources to meet the program participants' concrete needs, social determinants of health needs and or well-being needs to reduce barriers and prevent system involvement. Up to 25% of the budget can be allocated towards minor capital expenses, which include leasing vehicles or leasing housing solutions for program. Up to 30% can be allocated towards other program-related expenses such as staffing. This is also reflective of a value that it is intended that at least 50% of this funding opportunity go directly to meet the needs of girls and gender expansive youth. But in terms of needs, we're talking about the continuum of needs. These, as I mentioned, I just want to emphasize again, this can include concrete needs, social determinants of health needs, and or well-being needs. Needs that may reduce barriers and prevent systems involvement. With that, definitely share about eligibility criteria. We will be looking for applications that have a track record of office located and or of work in eligible county and in an eligible county that the organization is applying from. Must demonstrate interconnectedness with existing ecosystem serving girls and gender expansive young people, and proposed programs must serve 100% in eligible counties. Must deeply engage with and reflect the communities disproportionately impacted by the juvenile and adult systems. Organizations should have a history of working with impacted communities, including representation on their board, staff, and organizational leadership. Are a 501c3 community-based organization or tribal organization with established and trusted community relationships. Fiscal sponsorships are eligible. In terms of track record, we acknowledge, right, that some organizations do not have an office, but they for sure have a track record of work. So it's okay if your organization doesn't specifically have an office in that county you're applying from or to. But we definitely will be looking at for that track record of work. We will also be looking at track record in terms of being part of the ecosystem that's currently already engaged in ending the incarceration of girls and gender expansive youth. So definitely want to share that with folks here. Eligibility criteria continued. Have staff and demonstrated experience partnering with the young people that are the focus of this funding opportunity. This funding opportunity is also open to coalitions of organizations and collaborative if the lead organization is an eligible applicant. For organizations that are applying on behalf of a coalition or collaborative, we will be looking at specifically defined roles and how all of that is really aimed at experience by young people that is seamless and that supports them in a holistic way. Eligibility criteria continued includes must have demonstrated evidence of inclusivity and shall not discriminate based on race, color, religion, creed, gender expression, age, national origin, ancestry, disability, marital status, sexual orientation, or military status in any of its activities or operations. With that shared, we definitely want to also share that the rooting framework of this funding opportunity is social justice youth development. Stronger applications will be those that align with social justice youth development. And to share a little bit about it, we wanted to share with you all a visual that includes some of the guiding principles, some frameworks y'all might be familiar with that are that include positive youth justice. We want to be transparent that this initiative is rooted in social justice youth development and positive youth justice approaches to meeting the needs of youth involved in the legal system. Both social justice youth development and positive youth justice as frameworks expand on scientific literature of positive youth development. However, PYJ applies positive youth development approaches in the juvenile justice system context, and social justice youth development expands positive youth development to address social and systemic factors, including racism, xenophobia, and other racial inequities that youth face as they develop into adulthood. The scientific literature also establishes that the needs of young people involved in the legal system overlap with social determinants of health needs. That's why they're included here. And these in turn are often rooted in systemic inequities exacerbated by systemic racism. Social justice youth development acknowledges these systemic forces, such as systemic racism, and supports young people in developing the skills and knowledge necessary to transform the systems that influence their health outcomes, along with their lives, neighborhoods, and broader communities. Social justice youth development expands on traditional asset-based youth development approaches by supporting civic engagement and leadership development. So we want to emphasize here, this is about cultivating agency, self-determination, empowerment. That agency of I can change things can be changed, and this is how. So we want to acknowledge that this is the rooting framework. Hopefully the visual is helpful, and at this moment, I'll pass it back to our colleague, Celine.
Thank you, Abraham. We also wanted to provide this triangle framework to help applicants as you're thinking about programmatic solutions. So we've stated before, much evidence demonstrates that young people in today's youth legal system should be diverted from formal court processing, and that the majority of those youth who are formally court involved can be safely served through community-based alternatives that address accountability without reliance on detention and placement in facilities. And what we've also covered is that girls and gender expansive young people who are already involved in youth legal systems or are at risk for involvement in those systems are also the young people who are most impacted by trauma, have more acute mental health and or substance use needs, and may require those higher number of dedicated hours to serve, and may require creative strategies to keep them engaged and to engage them in programming to begin with. And because of all those things, we often see that girls and gender expansive young people who have those more complex needs are more likely to be excluded from existing continuums of care, and as a result, get stuck in cycles in incarceration as a result. Thinking about all this and then thinking about the EGI goals of the diversion programming that we've already outlined earlier in today's presentation, we really wanted to provide this triangle framework to help applicants think about where to focus potential programming solutions. If you look at this framework, you see here in the chart that the tip of the triangle represents programming that most immediately reduces the number of girls and gender expansive youth who are coming into custody and decreases length of stay for those young people when they are in custody. While programming towards the middle of the triangle represents programming that may more indirectly affect custody, for example, aftercare programming in schools. And programmatic solutions that are further down towards the bottom of the triangle are those that focus on girls' well-being more broadly. So maybe, as an example, general financial welfare programming or primary prevention of abuse programming. And while we encourage applicants to provide preventative services, all applicants should prioritize programming that is here at the tip of this triangle that targets young people who are noted above, with the goal of more immediately reducing those detention numbers in girls' units, how deep girls get into the system, girls' entries into facility, and the amount of time that girls are involved in court, and also works to ameliorate those racial and gender disparities that impact young people across the entire spectrum of youth carceral system points. And so we hope this is helpful framing for you as you're thinking again about your potential applications.
Thank you so much, Celine. And strong alignment with these frameworks is encouraged. With that shared, the next set of slides will elaborate or just highlight what has been shared at the beginning in terms of context. We will also expand on some of the specifics of each county. However, here, we can't highlight this enough because it's like the problem continues since the creation of the current system that we have in California. This funding opportunity intends to challenge systemic inequities. Evidence shows that detaining girls and gender expansive youth due to concerns for their individual safety or for immediate human service need is completely out of step with best practices, as Celine has mentioned. This exposes them to more harm, and it can exacerbate the very issues that brought them to court in the first place. This is about orienting counties and state approaches towards healing towards different paradigms of justice. Given these proposals to this RFA will be evaluated based on alignment to the EGI initiative goals. To reemphasize the initiative goals, as it was shared earlier, 1, implement gender responsive diversion programming to keep young people in the community. 2, promoting community well-being, healing, and safety of girls and gender expansive youth through implementation of healing-based, gender responsive, and culturally appropriate diversion programs, and through transformative relationships, unwavering engagement, and accompaniment. There are 5 outcomes that we'll be measuring or looking into, shared by all counties. These are listed here. Improve knowledge and skills. 1, that maintain and strengthen or develop the implementation of community-driven, gender and culturally responsive healing promoting programs to offer counties effective diversion options to incarceration for girls and gender expansive youth. 2, that contribute to unwavering and transformative commitment in engaging and supporting young people through their programming. 3, in supporting the leadership of young people in generating possibilities towards systems change of local, regional, juvenile justice systems through community and system level engagement and collaboration. 3, could speak to social justice youth development. 4, that contributes to incorporating young people's perspectives on how the program is operating and serving youth. And 5, to establish or maintain robust internal systems and processes oriented for sustainable program operations. And we wanted to include number 5 because we acknowledge that this is a one-time funding opportunity. We want to be upfront as a transparency statement that was shared earlier, but throughout the 2 years, part of that resource or this funding opportunity could go towards helping establish and maintain the internal systems and processes necessary to be successful in applying for other funding opportunities that will continue the programs that are either expanded or funded and or launched and created. So with that said, pass it back to our colleague, Celine.
So in addition to those 2 broader goals, EGI goals that I reviewed earlier and that Abraham revisited a little while ago in this webinar, that will be used to evaluate specific applications to this RFA. There are also some site-specific program priorities that have been identified for each individual site. And these outline components of programming specific to each county are ones that applicants will be expected to be responsive to in their application responses. And we understand that programs may not be able to fully meet every criterion that's listed here, but we encourage applicants to address as many as possible to strengthen proposals. So if we look first at Imperial County, next slide, please, Abraham. In Imperial County, the solicitation is looking for a program to provide gender responsive programming with mobile services or transportation support. This is primarily to better support girls and gender expansive young people and to prevent girls from being detained due to lack of service needs or due to personal safety reasons, which we've already discussed is not in line with best practice. Through the provision of both individual and group holistic supports, the funded program will ideally include the following components, and that includes culturally relevant healing programming, practices, or activities, individual and group mentorship that encourages young people to develop positive relationships through relevant programming, identification of ways to support youth and families outside of regular working hours to reduce the amount of time that young people spend in law enforcement custody following contact, ability to serve young people without parental consent when legally permissible, and or to take steps to receive permission from appropriate authorities when parents are not able or won't provide their consent for programming. The implementation of a warm handoff protocol to receive referrals from probation and introduce programming to young people in order to gain their consent for participation. The ability to serve girls and gender expansive youth with higher needs, for example, young people that are impacted by commercial sexual exploitation, may have substance use disorders or mental and behavioral health challenges, or strong referral systems to non-punitive resources that can meet the needs of those young people. A demonstrated capacity to effectively engage LGBT, transgender, non-conforming youth, or a strong collaboration with another program or LGBT, transgender, non-conforming specific organization that can help to meet those young people's needs. Provision of resources to caregivers and families to help families effectively maneuver systems as well as young people, and provide preventative and intervention-based resources and help families resolve conflict. And ability to support youth and families in family finding processes to avoid unnecessary detention due to a lack of housing specifically and/or placement options, particularly when young people cannot return home. And in Imperial, the use of credible messenger and/or community health worker staffing is highly encouraged as well. Moving to Sacramento, the solicitation here in Sacramento is soliciting applications for a gender-responsive, transformative mentoring program for girls and gender-expansive youth to divert them away from carceral legal systems and to support their health and well-being in communities. The funded transformative and self-determination mentoring program will aim to pair each young person who's referred to the program with a coach or a mentor who will meet young people in the community on a regular basis to provide one-on-one transformative and self-determination mentoring. And in addition to that mentoring and coaching, more intensive holistic supports should also be provided to young people participating in the program that helps them to meet specific needs of girls and gender expansive youth in Sacramento. And these more intensive supports would ideally include, at a minimum, the program able to connect young people and in the program and their families to needed services and resources in the community, and helping to facilitate a warm handoff to those resources. Assisting girls and gender expansive youth who participate in the program through the family finding process to safely identify family members or individuals with whom a young person may stay. So again, they don't have to be screened into detention due to a lack of housing or a lack of placement options, or because there's nowhere else for them to go other than detention. And that includes helping young people and families navigate the necessary consents that are required for those housing options, or to be able to find some place to go that is not detention or placement. Support navigating the probation system, child welfare systems, court systems, and other child serving systems for both young people and their families. And the program providing transportation support to and from probation and service appointments in the community, which is really key in Sacramento. And one additional design component really includes centering the value of meeting young people where they are. And so to this end, while the programs that are ultimately funded in Sacramento may work with girls who are detained at the Sacramento Youth Detention Facility to facilitate smooth transition to programming upon release, and directly to girls and gender expansive young people who are at the Neighborhood Assessment Center or NAC, we want to emphasize that all services are to be located and provided within the community. Moving to San Diego, the solicitation here in San Diego is seeking applications that provide gender-responsive, transformative, and self-determination mentoring programming in order to holistically support girls and gender-expansive youth in communities. So here, using a healing-based, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive approach, the funded programs will again aim to pair each young person with a coach or a mentor who will meet with them in the community on a regular basis and provide that one-on-one transformative and self-determination mentoring and facilitate access to services for young people in their families. Again, here there are some additional programming components that are specific to San Diego that the program should pay special attention to, including really creating clear pathways for referrals. This means a program would ideally be able to accept referrals from a wide array of sources, including probation, child welfare, mental health, the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, and school-based sources as well. On young people and helping increase access for young people to housing resources and supports, which has been identified as a large need in the county, particularly for young people that are impacted by commercial sexual exploitation. So this may include assisting young people in the family finding process, working with families to identify respite options so that young people are able to stay at home or in placement, conducting proactive safety planning with girls and gender expansive young people and their families, and or offering gender responsive educational courses to parents to provide guidance on how they can better support their young person. And lastly, a program's ability to provide increased support for girls and gender expansive youth who are struggling to comply or maybe struggling to comply with programming requirements in the county. So this may look like providing transportation assistance to and from court hearings if transportation is a barrier to complying with that programming, providing transportation to community supports and resources that young people may need in the community, working collaboratively with girls and gender expansive young people to identify and address barriers that may cause them to struggle with their programming, or maybe causing them to leave home or care, and also advocating on behalf of girls when the given are overly cumbersome or don't take girls and gender expansive young people's individual needs and circumstances into account. And lastly, moving to LA County. In LA, the solicitation is seeking programs that provide support for girls and gender expansive youth who don't pose an immediate threat to public safety, but are often still detained due to the lack of short-term respite options when housing is disrupted. For these young people, this lack of short-term respite options and or this lack of family support are leading to detention in cases where we know girls shouldn't be detained. And so we're seeking potential programming options that provide housing-related solutions that could prevent deeper system involvement, including detention. This could include short-term placement with community members, for example, who are identified by a community-based organization with deep ties to the local community and who receive support and are identified and cleared and trained and supported and receive a stipend to be able to host those young people and support those young people. And it could look like a host home model that's often used for youth in the youth homelessness and or emergency foster home systems. It could also look like short-term foster care home placements as an alternative to detention that's paired with services that are individually tailored to the young people. And the goal here would be to provide quick support in hopes of the young people returning home within a few weeks, within 2 weeks or so, or to give stakeholders time to identify a longer-term placement option if returning home is not possible. Or it could also look like existing resourcing, existing foster care homes who could be supplemented with more support for young people, additional training, more intensive healing, promoting non-incarcerating and non-surveillance services and supports, and increased compensation and support for those families to incentivize them to accept young people with unmet needs. So these are some of the creative solutions that could be proposed to address those housing-related solutions. We're also looking potentially for organizations to think about programming that offers family support, either just family support or in addition to the housing related solutions that you see here. And again, that family support could look like parent peer coaches who are on call to provide support and assist with resource connections, system navigation, and crisis intervention. It could look like mediation services for young people and their families to resolve more intense or ongoing conflicts. It could look like skills training for young people and their families, specifically around conflict resolution, or it could look like other parent support groups or family support groups. So here in LA, again, thinking about those young people and what they need, housing related solutions, family supports, or a combination of the both.
Thank you so much, Celine. And with that, we wanted to share this visual here, summarizing some of the information shared, which is the 2 initiative goals, the 5 outcomes shared by all counties, and the program specific to each of the counties. With that, we wanted to just take a moment to at this point to answer some questions. I just want to say, definitely thank you all for joining again and all the work that y'all are doing. I'm sure day in and day out with your respective organizations. I want to acknowledge folks that are present and attending. With that, I'll pass it to Antonia for some questions.
Thank you. We have several questions here in the chat, and some of them are, we're trying to get through all of them. here, but in answer, I'm sorry, a question here. What agencies are currently funded under previous iterations of this funding, if any?
Thank you for that question, and I'll defer to the Vera team in terms of, I believe, year one funding.
Marcia is on from OICR, so correct me if there's any nuances related to OICR grants. But basically, in the first year of the initiative, the only funding went directly to county probation agencies, and it was for administrative needs related to their participation in the first year of the Action Network process. This is the first time that there is an RFA to fund programming for ending girls' incarceration through OICR. Marcia, is there anything that you would add to that? If you're on.
Hi, everybody. Lindsay, you answered that accurately. For this particular initiative, the first outside funding outside of probation is this. So we have only funded probation up till now.
Thank you. Marcia, I believe this might be another question that you'll be able to answer, but is the grant a part of OICR's annual budget? How are the funds brought to counties via local county DYD, so Department of Youth Development?
Okay, so it was part of our annual budget up until we granted and awarded through a competitive process to the Sierra Health Foundation to be the third-party administrator. So now the funds are with Sierra Health Foundation, the center. And so through Sierra Health Foundation is that then you have this RFA. And this is how the funds will go out on a competitive process to CBOs. Does that answer? Yeah. Fully?
Yes.
And I'm not sure about DYDs because it sounds like maybe DYDs are government and this funding is for CBOs. Unless if this entity DYD is a 501c3, then yes, they do qualify, or if they're in a partnership with an organization that has a 501c3. We've known of those kinds of partnerships that are umbrella type partnerships.
Thank you. Yeah, and if there's any follow-up from the participant that asked the question, please feel free to drop that in the chat. Another question that we have here, in terms of impact, what is the funder's expectation of the number of girls to be served by agency? Is it a percentage of total population? Would a more modest program be considered competitive?
In terms of impact, definitely would be open for Vera team and OICR to elaborate. But we'll be looking at it, making sure that there's an option for counties in terms of diversion programming. That's one of the main goals, and also continuing to serve girls and gender expansive youth. We will be looking at ways to measure and develop, co-developing a template, a tool, and an evaluation component with awarded organizations. We didn't want to get ahead of this funding opportunity by maybe prescribing one particular level of impact or a number. We want to make sure that we wanted to co-create that with the organizations that are awarded. However, what I can share is we want to make sure that the outcomes are advanced, that the goals of the initiative are advanced, and that the programs identified by each county are also responsive. We're being responsive to. With that shared, Selena and OICR, would y'all like to elaborate in terms of, for example, a modest proposal that maybe one organization that's proposing to serve 100 girls and gender expansive youth versus maybe 20-25 a year, but it's very, very perhaps like it's about the quality of the engagement, right? So there's a lot of variables to that, but any responses that y'all will add to what I just shared?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to assign a specific number because each county, like the needs of Imperial County versus LA County are going to be very different in terms of the scale of programming that's required. And Abraham, I absolutely agree with what you said regarding this is also about depth of programming. And so one of the things that you'll see the RFA is very careful to outline is that, this RFA is targeted at young people who often fall through the cracks and may require more intensive support. And so that's another factor that we'll be looking at. So, as Abraham said, it does need to meet the goals of the initiative, but there's room to co-create the specific scale based on the types of services being proposed.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thank you. So, a similar question is, would an agency have to propose to serve all of a specific county, or could we propose to focus on a geographic region within a given county?
Definitely, the county in general, like we are open to applications that will focus on a specific region or the county in general. We definitely acknowledge that some of the counties is definitely difficult to cover services throughout the whole county. Perhaps regional equity in terms of need will be a factor during the review process. So I do share that. Anything else that Vera and or YCR would respond to that? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Another question that's come in is, can an organization serve girls and gender responsive youth 18 and over only?
Apologies. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, of course. So can an organization serve girls and gender responsive youth that are 18 and over only?
Vera team, in terms of age range? Over.
I mean, OICR, I think you'd have the final say, but the question is, could they serve only 18 and older?
No, they would have to serve girls and gender expensive youth that are currently in the youth justice system. That includes, 14 all the way up to 17 that are in the youth justice system. And then for girls and gender expensive youth that are in SYTFs, that does take them from 18 to 25. But who are currently sitting in facilities right now are mostly the greater numbers are from that 14 to 17. And so if there was only 18 and above, I don't think that serves what this RFA, the spirit of this RFA. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question is, can organizations submit applications to more than one county?
Thank you for asking that question. It was also asked at a previous webinar. The response was your application, submit a different application for each of the counties that you'll be applying to. We'll definitely be accepting multiple. An organization can apply both in San Diego and in LA, but it cannot submit 2 applications for one county alone. So you could submit to 2 different counties, and you can share. Again, we're going to be looking at track record. What's the track record of work in that county of your organization? However, an organization cannot apply twice for one county. A fiscal sponsor, on the other hand, can. So if your fiscal sponsor has 2 different organizations in one county, that fiscal sponsor can apply multiple times. We'll be reviewing those nuances as a team. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Would a collaborative project that serves the whole county be preferred over a project from a single organization that focuses on one part of the county?
The strength of application will be dependent not just on single versus collaborative. It's going to be alignment to the values, the guiding principles, the frameworks, the goals, the outcomes, the program priorities, as well as other considerations in the RFA. So we cannot tell right now in terms of individual versus collaborative. Many of the individual applying organizations may be part of collaboratives, right? Separately. So that's the response we can give at this moment.
Thank you.
One more?
There are about 6 more questions coming in. Please let me know if we have to move forward.
Yeah, we'll take one more and then we'll move forward and then we'll pause at the next section.
Okay, thank you. So last question here is, in Sac County, would we be allowed to fund stipends for students that attend our peer mentoring classes / programs?
Yeah.
This could be a strong preventative point and also something that probation may want students to attend as well.
Yeah, most definitely. Stipend barrier removal, it can be included in meeting the participant needs. Most definitely. I don't know, Celine or Marcia, would you like to add to that response?
No, I think that's covered in the allowable expenses piece, but I think again, focusing on removing financial barriers for young people so that they are not pushed further into youth legal systems would be the lens to use in thinking about financial and economic supports for young people.
Most definitely. Ideally, stronger applications will be from programs whose structure involve like engagement from stipend to more sustainable, either employment and or training and or opportunities. So we'll look at proposals holistically, right? We definitely want to make sure that as best as possible, proposals are addressing the drivers, the root causes, and advancing long-term solutions or to make sure young people stay in the community. With that shared, we'll continue the webinar. So now for this part of the webinar. So if expected, awarded, if what to expect if awarded and requirements. So if your organization is awarded, you can expect a responsive payment schedule. Each agreement will be divided into a minimum of 3 payments, 40% upon execution of the award agreement and fulfilling of insurance requirements, 40% after demonstrating progress on the work plan that will be developed by awarded organizations to advance the 2 goals, the 5 outcomes, and the program priorities, as well as completion of progress report 1, due March 31st, 2025. The date may be subject to change. Although in this responsive payment schedule is not directly tied to service or deliverable directly, it is dependent on demonstrating progress, right, on the work plan that will be developed. So that's a little bit of a nuance. The last 20% will be disbursed after demonstrating progress, again, on the work plan to advance the 2 goals, the 5 outcomes, completion of progress narrative and annual financial report for year 1. And that may be subject to change. So that'd be March 31, 2026. If awarded, requirement upon announcement, organizations will be required to submit during the application. Definitely, we acknowledge that organizations are submitting budget and budget narrative justifications. The reason why we added it here in terms of if awarded is because in each county, some organizations might submit a proposal for 1 million. But let's just say OYCR and or the review committee selects or recommends more than one organization in that county, and an awarded organization had submitted a proposal for 1 million. That budget and budget narrative would have to be updated. We have to be transparent. The amount would be reduced. I believe the lowest award would be of 333,000 something over 2 years. So we would provide an opportunity for organizations to rebudget and submit another budget justification along with it. We would have that time to also develop a work plan together that speaks to some of the questions around impact. We would co-develop a plan for submitting quarterly reports. We would share out the templates with questions we would ask during those quarterly reports. Financial report. You want to share that. And we would connect about organizations can budget for insurance costs throughout the initiative if awarded. And apologies, my internet connection's unstable. So let me see if it continues. Please let me know. If awarded, organizations will be required to work on a work plan and submit a work plan. It must adhere to funding guidelines clearly linked to the proposal project activity submitted in the application, to the two goals of the initiative, the intended outcomes, and to the program priorities of the respective action network sites. Must have a indirect cost. Just want to reiterate, indirect cost of no more than 20% of direct costs. And they must advance as the work plan, as we shared in terms of the work plan. If awarded, the requirement will be quarterly reporting. The questions can be found in the RFA. These will include financial reports with detailed expenditure listings describing actual expenditures of funding. If awarded, this is a reporting and data table. So this is what you can expect in terms of the sequencing of these progress reports. As you can see here, from December 1 to January 31, we'll be working with awarded organizations on the work plans. If they have to rebudget, we'll do that and the budget justification. After that, there'll be progress narrative reports and financial reports. We will ask for a cumulative report and a cumulative financial report at the end of the grant term, due November 30, 2026. Offerings. Vera and OYCR will coordinate training resources for CBO providers in the continuum of practice to support implementation of program concepts funded through the RFA. Priorities for training will be informed by the needs of the grantee organization to support the implementation of programming and may include best practice on gender responsive care, youth justice practice, and sustainable funding streams. So those may be some TA offerings that will be included throughout the initiative. We'll definitely be develop a process to be responsive to the TA needs of each individual organization. Vera and OYCR will facilitate meetings with local partners involved in the EGA California Action Network to align the implementation of the programming to the broader reform goals of counties' efforts to end gross incarceration. This will include sharing data on gross experiences in the county's youth legal system. So there were some questions about support in managing or establishing partnerships with agencies that may be part of that TA offering. So that's what we can share at this moment in terms of awarded organizations will receive some TA. So I'm going to pause here just to, okay. In terms of other offerings, awarded organizations will also take part in a community of practice. The goal of the community of practice will be for CBOs to learn from each other and with each other in a cohort setting, receive support with troubleshooting implementation challenges, receive training and technical assistance on funding streams, as it was shared before, that can support sustainability. Other TA might be available, and enhance practice related to ending gross incarceration. So the cohort will provide a community of like-minded providers working to provide gender and culturally responsive services to young people and end gross incarceration throughout the state. The fact that the awarded organizations will be part of a network that currently exists in 4 counties is definitely unique in California. Hopefully that grows, right, in terms of not only a network of CBOs developing this community of practice, but also hopefully the commitment by counties to end the incarceration of gross and gender expensive youth. We will also be uplifting this community of practice to the legislature, decision makers in the future, to really highlight the need for additional state funding towards these efforts. If awarded, insurance requirements are listed in the RFA. There will be insurance requirements on these funding agreements, the cost of which can be built into the project budget. For awarded, communication will be sent to awarded organizations to upload the insurance documents and demonstrate compliance with all insurance requirements. Payments will not be released until insurance compliance requirements are met. This is a point where you would interact with our team members, Joan and or Carissa. And please reference this resource here, Cal Nonprofits Insurance Services, for further information. Insurance includes commercial general liability, professional liability, improper sexual conduct and abuse, automobile liability. Additional requirement. Certificate holder must read Sierra Health Foundation at the address listed here, 1321 Garden Highway, Sacramento, California 95833. It must be rated at least A-, and it must state the following description of operations must read. So that exact text should be in the certification of insurance. Make sure, please, that it includes agreement number 23-30138. It must be present and it references the contract between the center and OYCR. Workers' compensation and employment liability insurance will also be required. With that said, just want to just take the time at this moment to just maybe take one question before we move to the last section of this webinar. So I'll pass it to you, Antonia, for at least one question, 1 or 2 questions.
Sure. There's a variety of questions, I guess, related to the funding opportunity itself. Since this is only 1-year funding, is there an expectation of a commitment to sustainability past the first year?
You know, that commitment is really based on the track record. So we know that awarded organizations will already have a commitment, right, to continue supporting girls and gender expansive youth. We do acknowledge that because we cannot guarantee another round of funding opportunity, it would be we cannot put that on organizations. So the commitment will be to continue your track record of serving girls and gender expansive youth. Vera and or OYCR, anything y'all would add to that response? Okay.
Thank you. And then, can you please elaborate on service demographics? Do the girls and gender responsive youth have to be already systems impacted, or can they be at risk / high risk?
So if you refer back to the triangle framework, we are looking for programs that prioritize solutions that are at the tip of that triangle, and that includes young people that are already system impacted or that are most at risk for system involvement in order to prevent or their system involvement or prevent deeper involvement with systems. So I would say we are looking at programs that can potentially serve both of those young people, given that that's who we know is often stuck in those cycles of incarceration due to their complex needs.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We could take one more question at this moment.
Sure. Let's see. How were allocations for each county decided? There are significant differences in the number of people in each county. So not sure why each county gets the same amount of funding. Can someone address?
Most definitely. Thank you, Marcia.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were going to try. Okay, so this is amount of funding because some responses take quite a bit of investment, and other responses to be broader for larger numbers of young people, but still labor intensive. And so I think that we're open to hearing what, and so it was within that vision that we allocated the 1 million per county, and then to see what comes from CBOs in terms of not only the diagnostic of what was already identified by looking at the data, but then also hearing from probation what they felt was needed. So all of that is baked in this RFA. And so then the responses from CBOs to these needs that have already been identified and how to respond. Because remember, this is about ending girls' incarceration. So we want to stay very focused there. Exactly how Celine has mentioned it, it's that top of that triangle. And so to end girls' incarceration, we have to start somewhere in terms of how do we get girls and gender expansive youth out.
Thank you so much. And so at this moment, we'll continue with the webinar. The review of applications and recommendation of awardees. The center, Vera, a community member from each of the selected counties, and a system stakeholder representative from each of the selected counties will serve as the review and recommendation committee. Committee recommendations will be based on applicants that present the most complete and responsive applications, showing the most favorable mix of credentials, capacity, potential, and cost. Applications will be judged on the overall strength and implementation team and proposal. We shared out throughout the webinar what we would make an application, a strong application. An application appeal process is not available for this funding opportunity. Okay. The application will be reviewed using the following criteria: track record, strong responsive to narrative questions in alignment with the routing framework of this funding opportunity, which include social justice, youth development, and the triangle framework. The 2 initiative goals, the 5 outcomes, and required components of programming specific to each county. Other things that will involve a strong application that will be included in review criteria will be strong alignment with values and guiding principles of the RFA. Other factors that may inform the final slate of awarded organizations include demographic diversity, underserved youth population, geographic coverage, and programmatic approaches. OYCR holds final decision-making authority in selecting the funded projects. Incomplete applications will not be reviewed. Applications received after the above deadline will not be considered. This is the timeline here. Application deadline, Thursday, November 7th, 2024 at 1 p.m. At the center's discretion, the timeline below may shift or be subject to change to best meet the programmatic needs of funder requirements. Review of applications will take place in this timeline, November 11th to December 20. Approximate award announcement would be week of January 6th. Approximate date of subcontracts issued January 31, 2024. Note that all funding will be backdated to December 1, 2024, even if subcontracts are signed after. Checklist. In your application and in the online form, as Antonia will share in a little bit, you will be asked to submit a document by the executive director. The signed Word or PDF document must include the ED's signature at the bottom as a commitment and affirmation of the below. have executive support for the proposed project as evidenced by a signed letter of support from a senior administrator demonstrating willingness to commit staff time and resources to add new activities. Affirm the applicant's ability to submit data and financial progress reports on a specific set of measures, and affirm participation in activities of the external capacity building efforts and TA efforts throughout the entirety of the funding opportunity. Also, organizations will be required to submit detailed costs, budget justification, or narrative that adheres to the funding guidelines. Again, it must be consistent with what was shared earlier. If you are unable to submit your application online or need help, please contact us at tyj@sierrahealth.org with the subject line TYJ EGI application online help. Upcoming office hours are Thursday, October 24, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And there was one yesterday that took place from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. So please sign up or attend an office hour. And at this moment, now we will transition to the actual online form. And for that section, I will pass it to my colleague, Antonia.
Thank you, Abraham. And so, as Abraham mentioned, we are going to be moving through the actual application process that you will see when you go online. Let me drop the link for that application here in the chat. Really important that folks apply through this link and really only this link. Anything else, we can't guarantee that we'll be able to see it or for it to make it back to our internal system. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so here on the start page is just a reminder to read through the online through the request for applications to be able to submit this application. Abraham, if you could move to the next slide here. Really want to highlight the section here that is in yellow. This question is a project sponsored by the applicant organization. So if you are applying through a fiscal sponsor, meaning that you do not hold a 501c3 status, the fiscal sponsor will be the leading applicant for through this online application. The fiscally sponsored, so the organization that is going to be executing the work, will also be required to provide some information, but really want to be clear here that this question is asking you if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, please indicate yes. And if you are not using a fiscal sponsor and you are the lead applicant, to click no. Want to highlight this feature here, the Save My Progress and Resume Later feature. This allows you to, if you've started your application, that you'll be able to save it, provide an email address and a password to resume the form later. Want to be very clear that this feature does not allow for multiple people to work within the application at once, that only one person can work in the application. And also want to reiterate that if you do use this feature and you forget your password, we can help you, but really want to advise folks to work on the application offline on a separate Word document so that when they come into this online application, they can just copy and paste their answers and review them. You know, technology sometimes has its downfalls, and want to make sure that we don't lose your progress. So as mentioned before, if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, that fiscal sponsors would fill out this section. So the organization name and any related information is going to be that of the fiscal sponsor. If you do not have that and you are the lead applicant with a 501c3 status, this is where your information would go. The organization financial information, so the annual budget, the tax ID, this would all be related to the fiscal sponsor or the lead applicant of the of this. Again, the CEO director of the organization would be of the lead applicant or that of the fiscal sponsor. This is an opportunity to add in any additional contacts that you would like when you submit your application, they will all receive a copy of the narrative questions and anything that you've answered here. So, for example, a financial officer or a contract administrator, if you do not want to provide this information, that's okay too. You just select no. And so for folks that are applying with a fiscal sponsor, the fiscally sponsored organization executing the work would provide their information here. So the organization's name and other info, and then the contact from the sponsored entity. This can be the CEO of the fiscally sponsored, a lead from this organization who will also receive a copy of the response and the award notifications. Here is where you would be able to provide on page 2 the name of the project, a brief purpose of the project. It'll start with 2, so to execute work in Los Angeles with gender expansive youth, and stronger details. The start date, the project end date, and the amount requested. So all the opportunities will receive up to $1 million. Project geography, this is where you'll be able to break down. Folks have mentioned that they might be executing work in 2 different counties or in different regions. So this is where you'll be able to provide that breakdown for your application. Folks have also asked if there is a minimum or maximum of participants. Here you'll be able to provide the estimate of the number of people that are going to be served or affected by this project. And so as mentioned before, so whatever number is listed here, we definitely expect that the application responses support this number here. And you'll also be able to indicate either urban, rural, or both. Here's another breakdown of project race and ethnic group. And so folks have asked a question about racial equity, and this is where you'll be able to display like who your participants or who you intend to engage with and the racial breakdown. Project age group, you'll be able to provide a thorough breakdown of who the youth will be or the young adults. Additional areas of focus. This gives us an understanding of the other identities that these youth may be, that they might have. So if they're foster youth, 2S or LGBTQ plus youth, as Celine mentioned earlier, that there are a multitude of reasons why youth might find themselves to be systems impacted. And so these are additional areas if the organization plans on addressing those as well, they'd be able to convey that here. Racial ethnic makeup of board and staff will be able to provide a breakdown of what the staff and the board looks like. And so you'll be able to show here that, your staff reflects the population that is being served here or what that looks like within your organization. As mentioned earlier, the narrative questions, these are the headers for each of the narrative questions. Want to highlight here that for the LA applications, only if you're proposing to provide housing to minors, please provide the type of license you would use to offer housing. So this question will only be for the Los Angeles applicants, and that'll be highlighted within the online application. Here's an example of what that would look like. There's a header, it tells you the word maximum and then the question itself, and you'll be able to enter your response there. Moving on to the attachments. So if you are a fiscally sponsored organization, we ask that you provide the fiscal sponsorship agreement that is going to be under the optional section because not all organizations will be asked to submit this. But required attachments, as mentioned earlier, the W-9, the budget with a budget justification, the IRS determination letter, the annual budget, and a support letter. Here's an example of what that looks like within the online portal. And then here's an example of what the optional attachment that is for, well, not optional for organizations that are fiscally sponsored, but this is the way that it was able to be set up within the system. Here's what that would look like. Please be sure to select submit that yes to submit that attachment. And then lastly, as you complete your form, really important that you review and confirm your responses. There's a page here that will show you what you have submitted. And it's really important that you go through and make sure that all of your native questions are submitted. We know that technology glitches sometimes and it might not have captured all of your answers. So please be sure to read through all the way to the end that your responses were captured. If for whatever reason they weren't, please be sure to make a correction. This will send you back into the application and you'll be able to change any responses. A successful submission is going to send you to just a very simple page that's going to say thank you at the top left. And then in your inbox, you should receive a copy of your responses. It'll be a PDF and it'll say thanks for your application to the Transforming Youth Justice and Girls Incarceration Initiative. If you do not receive this copy, please check your spam and or send us an email to the TYJ inbox and we'll be able to see what's going on. Alrighty. Seeing that there are currently no questions, we'll move on to how to be competitive. Thank you. So competitive applications are going to present a clear and complete application. So they're going to include clearly explain that why the organization is the right organization to implement the project. And they're also going to really include the track record of engaging with the community and also support the EGI initiative year 2 goals. So the first being that they're going to implement gender responsive diversion programming to keep young people in the community and also promote in-community well-being, healing, and safety of girls and gender expansive youth through the implementation of healing-based, gender responsive, and culturally appropriate diversion programs through transformative relationships, engagement, and accompaniment. So applications that will be competitive will support these goals. Applications are also that are competitive will also demonstrate an equity framework that really recognizes the need to strive for health and racial equity in program activities and outcomes. They're also going to demonstrate a support and understanding of social justice youth development within their programming and also use an intersectional approach to health equity. So really understand that folks are multifaceted and that there are layers to how they have found themselves to be systems impacted. Some proposal writing tips. So please be sure to read the application, the request for applications thoroughly and to follow the guidelines and instructions. Most importantly, verify that your organization is eligible. So 501c3s, organizations without that status can apply through a fiscal sponsor. However, for-profit organizations are not eligible even with a fiscal sponsor. Also, please answer the questions clearly and provide enough detail. There is a 500 word limit, so definitely a lot of space to answer the questions. They are pretty long, but we definitely encourage folks to be detailed but also concise. And then also clearly explain that how your project what change will come from this organization, your organization specifically, implementing this. Your narrative should be consistent with the budget proposal and budget justification. So anything that is being proposed within in your narrative should also be reflected in your budget proposal and in your justification. Please be sure to include how you reach these numbers, whether they be historical or just a breakdown. We encourage folks, sorry about that. We encourage folks to have someone that is not a part of this project to read through your draft and for it to be clear to them that what your intention is with applying. And then lastly, please review the attachment checklist to ensure that you have all the required documents. And then for the actual application itself within the portal, some tips: use the Save Progress and Resume Later button. You're able to use this, but again, I definitely encourage folks to complete their application offline on a Word doc or Google Doc so that you can be collaborative and then submit through the online portal. Be sure to submit the application before the deadline. And as you write your responses, track your word count. And here we go. Lastly, again, review the application instructions and criteria. Coalitions can apply as long as one eligible organization is the applicant, and complete the application in the online portal. And I will be sure to drop that link here in the chat. Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. And if you're unable to submit your application, please reach out to us for some help before the deadline at tyj@sierrahealth.org. Upcoming office hours here on Thursday, the 24th from 1 to 2 p.m. We'll be able to connect with us personally and ask questions live and have your any burning questions that were answered today answered there. Thank you. I'll pass it back to you, Abraham.
Thank you so much, Antonia, and thank you all so much, folks that are still on. Thank you, Celine. Thank you, Devante. Thank you, Marcia. This definitely has been a collaborative effort to get to this funding opportunity being shared with folks on the call or on the Zoom. We wish you the best in this application process. We acknowledge it's not an easy application. It is extensive. We definitely acknowledge that. And at this moment, just definitely want to see if there's one question, one or two that we can answer before 1 p.m.
Yeah, we have a question here in the chat. Are letters of support allowable to substantiate track record?
We are asking for an only a letter of from the executive management team or the executive board or the executive director of the organization itself. We are, in terms of trust-based philanthropy, will rely on your responses throughout the narrative questions about your track record and your commitment. There will be a question that allows for you to share a little bit about your organization. You can share a little bit of that track record there, but a formal letter, currently we won't have, the online form does not have a way to submit any additional letters.
Thank you. And then last question here in the Q&A, what budget category would subcontractor costs be considered under? Specifically, would subcontractor staffing costs count towards the 30% intended limit?
That's correct. Yeah, so that would be included in that 30, up to 30%. And proposals that request to allocate more than 30% towards staff and or subcontractors must have strong justifications. We'll look at the totality of the budget and also the proposal, and in the way that those subcontractors is intended to be part of the program that meets the complex needs or the needs of young people.
Thank you. That is all of the questions that I'm seeing here in the Q&A or in the chat.
All right, thank y'all so much. I really appreciate that. And I don't know, Celine, any closing words for folks?
No, just really glad to have this opportunity to share more about the RFA with you. And again, as Abraham said, good luck on your proposals.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.